Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today to talk a little bit about content marketing, particularly content marketing that we see really being effective moving forward as we head into 2014 here. So what I want to start by talking about is, just to get us off on the right foot, a definition of how we like to think about content marketing, what it is. Sometimes there's a little bit of confusion, about what defines content marketing. I'm not 100% sure what that is or what that means. So really the way that we see content marketing is as the sharing of stories, knowledge, and or information in a way that encourages brand engagement, evangelism, and sales. And I think what's really important to note about this sort of definition that we use of content marketing is that first of all, it's sharing of things that are interesting and fun and unique or engaging for users, but also that it's not only about the end game. So there are other things about content marketing that can be used as success metrics. So engagement and evangelism, for example, can be a really good goal for a content marketing campaign. So I like to just go into talking about content marketing with this kind of thought in mind. And in order to really get us off, thinking about all the critical elements of creating a content marketing campaign, I've sort of laid out what I term the 5 W's of content marketing, and that's really the why, who, what, where, when, and how of content. These are the steps that the sort of thought process that I think you need to go through in order to be able to create a content marketing campaign that's going to be effective. So the first thing you want to think about is the why, and that's the why am I doing content marketing? What are my goals? What am I hoping to get out of this engagement that I'm going through? Because quite frankly, it's going to be a pretty involved campaign. It's not something that you can slap together overnight. It takes a lot of resources. It takes different players at your company. So there's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of energy that goes into creating a really good content marketing campaign. And if you're going to invest all of that time and money into doing it, you really want to think about why specifically you are doing it and what you're hoping to get out of it. So you need to be establishing those success metrics up front. Otherwise, you'll never really be able to measure how successful you were, and you won't be able to sort of quantify whether or not it was worth it, or determine any changes that you need to make going forward into another content marketing campaign. Next, you want to really think about who your content audience is, and I'm very specific here to say content audience because that audience is probably going to be quite a bit broader than what you typically think of as your business audience or your consumers, your customers, your clients, or your prospects even. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but it is really important to think about all the different ways your content can be influencing people who might be engaging with your brand on, as I said, a bit of a greater scale than just your customers. So the what of content marketing is the what can I provide to that audience. You need to think about what types of things your users need or want from you. Where and how are you uniquely positioned to give them something that they're going to enjoy or that they're going to use and find useful to them. So you need to think about all the different types of content that are out there that you can realistically create and that your audience will actually care about and want to engage with. And that's really what's going to be the crux of this webinar, is talking about those different types of content, the ones that we see that are very successful and that we think are going to sort of grow in influence next year. It's also important to think about where your audience is going to engage with your content, and this will largely be influenced by what the content is. So, but going into your campaign creation, you need to think about where you're going to be hosting that content, where the content is going to live in the near term versus the long term, and how your audience is likely to engage with it. So different social networks, for example, Instagram versus Facebook, have very different purposes, and they lend themselves well to different types of content. So depending on the what of your content, that's going to really influence the where of your content. So those things go hand in hand, and you really need to think about what part of the web, what platform that you have access to is going to best support your content. And then finally, you want to think about the when and how of marketing your content. And this is really important because this is the marketing in content marketing, but it comes last and it sometimes gets forgotten. And we'll talk about it quite a bit towards the end of the webinar, but this is definitely something that needs to be considered in the beginning and definitely budgeted for. So let's start with the why of content marketing. There are a lot of reasons that are great reasons to do content marketing, but I think it's also important to talk about some of the things that are not reasons to do content marketing, because I think sometimes people go into an engagement like this, an initiative, with really, really lofty goals, and when you do that, when you're not realistic about what you can achieve and what purpose content marketing serves, then you're likely to just be disappointed in the outcome. So the first thing that content marketing is definitely not going to do for you is make you famous overnight. It has happened. People have run very successful content marketing campaigns that have gotten a lot of buzz and gotten people sort of 15 minutes of fame. But it's likely not going to take a small business, mom and pop soda shop is the example that I like to give. It's not going to take that small soda brand from the size that they are and the sort of recognition that they have to someone like Coke or Pepsi overnight. That's really not a goal of running a content marketing campaign. But on the other hand, what content marketing really can do effectively is help that mom and pop soda shop establish their thought leadership. So they can be talking about things that affect their industry, things that affect their consumers, maybe health concerns that are happening, that are being talked about in the industry. They can really emphasize their thought leadership, their contribution to to the consumers who care about a soda brand or who care about what's going on in that sort of marketplace. And that's definitely something that gets talked about a lot these days, the sugar in soda, the health concerns around soda, obesity, that whole epidemic. So that's something that where mom and pop soda shop can be contributing to that conversation and sort of elevate their brand a little bit by doing so. The second thing that you don't want to think of content marketing as doing for you is really driving sales immediately. It's not an immediate ROI campaign. It's more of generally it's used more as a top of funnel initiative. So what you're trying to do, as opposed to driving sales tomorrow in most cases, is really build relationships. So this goes back to establishing thought leadership. As you do that, you build relationships in the industry, people get to know who you are, and they're likely to remember you later and come back to you sort of at a time maybe when it's more appropriate to be talking about a sale, or when they come to the store and they want a soda and they're remembering some of that thought leadership put out by that mom and pop brand. So again, not driving sales tomorrow, but building relationships that are going to drive sales maybe a year from now. Content marketing definitely not going to get you to rank #1 for all of your keywords. So what I mean by this is obviously from an organic search perspective. Of course, having pages of your website show up on the first page of search engines for desirable terms is a big goal for many people, and content marketing is a part of that, but it's not a one-to-one relationship. So I think a lot of people go into content marketing with this idea that doing that is going to just shoot them, rocket their website to the top of the search engines very quickly, and that's not really the way that it works. What content marketing really does in this respect is grow brand awareness, and what that means is that there are going to be, ideally more mentions of your brand, more social shares of your brand, more links to your brand, and that helps overall with content, or rather that content helps overall with your rankings. So think of it as, part of any strong SEO campaign, but not the be-all and end-all that's going to turn it around for you overnight. And then finally, content marketing, the content that you're putting out is probably not going to go viral. I am going to talk about a campaign later that did go a little bit viral, but by and large, that's not something that's going to happen. What it can do, though, is engage a target audience, and that's what's really important. You want your content to impact the audience that matters to you as you've defined it, and not necessarily just to sort of blow up overnight and be in front of everybody on the web that day. It's really more about getting yourself in front of, again, that target audience, those people that really matter to you. So speaking of target audience, let's talk about the who of content marketing. I think it's really important when you go into a content marketing campaign to differentiate, again, I mentioned this a little bit before, between your content audience and your actual customers. The content audience is going to be much larger. It's going to have a broader scope, but that doesn't mean that it's not important. I think a lot of times we spend a lot of energy trying to think about, okay, how can we target our customers? What content can we get in front of them? And we narrow the focus a little bit too much. This happens a lot, I see, like in more B2B scenarios. So, we'll be thinking, how can we get in front of that, CEO of a hospital? And that's maybe sort of narrowing our scope a little bit too much. And the example that I like to give to explain this is actually using Blue Fountain Media as an example. So, I am in the marketing department here. I lead the marketing team. I have a lot of decision-making power when it comes to maybe software products that we're going to use in the department. But that doesn't mean that I should be the only target audience for somebody looking to sell, a marketing tool to Blue Fountain Media. So if a marketer in the department, reads a blog post about, they read a blog post written by a software provider that really teaches them something, it's very interesting, it shows us how to do this cool trick that saves us time, and that marketer shares it with me, I'm then exposed to the brand. I'm reading this cool content that they created that I find very valuable and useful to me, and I'm likely to remember it later. But so that when it comes time to make a decision, or maybe suddenly we have a need for that software or that tool, then I'm going to recommend it on for approval by whoever needs to approve it here at our company. So in that sense, the marketer wouldn't necessarily be the decision maker at the company, and so they might not naturally be somebody that you're targeting for your content, but they've really shared it. They've shared it to me. I've shared it on from there. Blue Fountain Media might one day become a customer of this fictional software company, And if not, we've probably shared it around the team. We've probably shared it out to our social networks, so people in the digital space that we know are also getting exposed to it. So it has this, there's a bit of like a spread effect there that happens. And I think that's really foundational to making sure that you're not limiting yourself when you're going into a content marketing campaign. So let's get to the fun stuff. We'll talk about the what of content marketing. So what is content? But more importantly than that, what is good content, obviously? I think a lot of times we really limit ourselves when we think about content. We talk about blog posts or, just sort of that more day-to-day content that you might, come across on a website. And not that there's anything wrong with blog posts. Blog posts are great. They're a great example of content marketing. But there's a lot more that you can be doing, and I think we're going to start seeing more and more of this next year. And as content marketing sort of ramps up and gains steam, and a lot of people enter the space and start running these campaigns. So I want to share a couple of examples of good content, and I think there are sort of three foundational elements of good content. The first is that it's audience appropriate, so it speaks to, again, that content audience that you've defined. The language makes sense for them. It's targeted to that sort of demographic. So if you're targeting marketers, for example, you're speaking in a language that they understand. It's more technical and more targeted at what they need. It's definitely has to be useful as well. So it has to be something that they're going to want to spend their time reading or consuming. And it should be user-focused, which means, it shouldn't really be about your brand so much as it should be about offering something cool and interesting for your users. So the first example of some good content marketing is this video example from Chipotle. And this is a video that they put together a couple of months ago. It's a cartoon video. Let's see if it plays here. So, hold on, I just need to pause. So this is a video that they put together. It's an animated video. It has a great Fiona Apple cover of a great song for the video, and the whole purpose of the video is it's this imaginary world. It's where processed food has taken over, and this little cartoon guy that you see here is sort of downtrodden about it and comes up with this idea to start selling more natural products. So it's sort of like a dark video. It's a little scary. It's sort of dystopian. And what I really love about this example is that it's not about Chipotle. It's about something that is part of Chipotle's sort of guiding philosophy, which is that as much as possible they want their food to be natural, and they really push that in their retail locations if you've ever been in one. But it's not about why Chipotle has the best burrito or whatever. It's about the fact that quality food is an issue that we face in this country and in other countries. So it's a topic that's important not only to the Chipotle audience, but really to anybody that eats food. And it's an emotional topic, and the video is appropriately emotional to match the subject matter. So the next example of good and innovative content marketing is hosting events. And sometimes people don't always think about event marketing as content marketing, but it's really both. So the example that I've used here is from us. We do this seminar every quarter, and we invite people to come and learn about marketing, learn about things that we think are trending in the space. And this is great content marketing, not only because we're getting people out to hear our sort of thought leadership, but we end up with all this material that we can use later on and repurpose in different ways. So, you know, we can share the videos from the event, we can share photos from the event, and we can put, you know, the presentations up on SlideShare or whatever. So, this type of content marketing has sort of a life. A life after the event is over, which makes it something that can be pretty cost effective because you can get a lot of material out of that one event. Webinars are another great form of content marketing. So most of you have probably seen this landing page again on our website. Webinars, similar to event marketing, is a great way of showing thought leadership or getting into a technical subject that is interesting to your users and can teach them something. What's great about webinars is that they take a lot less time than events. They're easy to set up. There's less of a cost barrier there. You know, you don't have to book a venue. You don't have to send out invitations other really than in email. Obviously, you want to do marketing around getting people to sign up for the webinar, but it's a little bit more cost effective than doing an event, but has the same outcome. As I said, you know, we can share a video from this webinar later, and we have this material that can be reused and repurposed after the event. White papers are a great form of sort of more long-form content marketing. So, you know, usually white papers are like way more in-depth than blog posts, for example. You can really demonstrate how much you know about a topic or an industry. This is an example of something that we did for a client. It's a really great way to talk to people in this space by giving them something that is really going to impact their business and without being obviously too pushy of their brand. So it's related to their brand, it's related to their industry, but it's something that their users and potential customers, potential clients could find interesting and useful whether or not they were ultimately going to go with the accomplish. What's also great about white papers is that there's this sort of natural lead generation that happens. People are very comfortable and familiar with giving up a name, an email, and maybe a phone number in the exchange for a white paper, so that you do end up getting that lead initially, and then you can do some marketing later on if they don't end up becoming a customer to sort of get them back and turn them into a customer. This is an example that I love. It's from McDonald's Canada, and it's a Q&A microsite that they put together to answer people's questions about McDonald's food. And I love this example because it's a little bit unique. You know, people don't always think of like a Q&A as a form of content marketing, but McDonald's managed to create this whole kind of world around these questions. And I think they pulled it off really effectively as well because it's a very honest and open and genuine move from a company that we probably don't think about that way. And it's sort of a recognition from McDonald's that there's a lot of mystery around their brand and their food, and that people have a lot of concerns about their food. And they're trying to address those here. You know, they don't shy away from some of the tougher questions, which is really refreshing. And I think what's really effective about this example as well is that, you know, for example, take myself, I'm definitely not a McDonald's consumer, so I might not be something that they would somebody that they would naturally consider targeting. And this is going back to the content audience again, but reading through this website and, you know, looking at these questions and looking at the answers, it honestly does begin to change my perception of the brand a little bit. It makes me that much more positive about the brand, and that might sound like a small thing, but if they can do that on a larger scale, that's a big win for them, for a brand that has, you know, definitely some negativity and concerns behind it. Data visualizations are one of my absolute favorite examples, and this one comes from Warby Parker. So examples of this can be creating an infographic, or what Warby Parker has done here is created a page on their site that's more of like an interactive infographic. So you obviously can't tell from this picture, but you can scroll through. You can sort of scroll through the year and see what happened to Warby Parker that year. And they did this in 2011. They did this in 2012. I'm sure they'll have an even better version out for 2013. But what they've done is they've taken their annual report and put it in this sort of interactive format that users will be actually interested in engaging with. So, and they also, they put actual sort of like business metrics in here, but they also put interesting facts and comments about their employees, for example, which social networks their employees use, how long their average commutes are. So it lends a lot of personality to the brand, which is something that's important to this brand in particular if you're not familiar with them. They have sort of a very personable presence and a very defined like brand image, and this is really in line with that. And I think it speaks also to, not only to taking a lot of data and presenting it in a way that is compelling, but it speaks to the fact that, the content audience versus customer. So if you think of all the benefits that something like this could have if it gets shared around, this is definitely a company that I think a lot of people who see this might naturally want to work for more. And if you've ever tried to recruit top digital talent, you might find that it can be kind of difficult. And I think things like this are what that type of talent really thinks are kind of cool. It shows some personality to the brand, so it can have effects on audiences outside of, again, your customer base. And so this example from Spotify is like a build on the data visualization, but it has this kind of shareable gift aspect to it, as I've called it. So Spotify just recently released their year in review, and again, it's a page on their website. This is at the bottom of the page, but you can scroll through the whole thing to see sort of highlights from Spotify in 2013. So most played tracks, most popular artists, I think like how many minutes people spent. Anyway, all that kind of interesting information. And then when you get to the bottom, if you're a Spotify user, you can log in and they'll give you your own personal statistics. And I think that if you have that kind of data and you can share it with your users, it's a really effective way to get them talking about you if they might not naturally be doing so already, because these are very shareable, and they make it very easy to share this, to push it out, to your social networks. And I've seen quite a few of these over the past couple of days, and this is a great example of marrying something that's about the brand with something that's not about the brand. It's about the user. So Spotify presents us with all these interesting statistics about them, but then they also give the user something that is about the user, and that's something that we all love. And then the final example, which might seem like a simple one, is photography. And I think this one, this form of content marketing gets overlooked sometimes, but this is an example that was created by Everlane, which is a clothing brand, and they have this. They have within the lifestyle of their brand, it's young, it's hip, it's about they have a slogan of radical transparency, so it's about being transparent about how their products are made and where they come from. Sort of all over the world. And so they ran this campaign that's really in line with their brand, where they asked for people to submit photos of, quote-unquote, where I travel with this hashtag on Instagram. They got, you can see here, close to 12,000 submissions. And, it's just a great way of highlighting, A, things that are sort of within that lifestyle of the brand, and B, different personalities and users who like Everlane and who are engaged with the brand. And what I also love about this example is that they didn't stop there, because they actually turned this into event marketing as well, because they took those Where I Travel pictures and they presented them, at a gallery. They picked the winners and they presented them at a gallery, and invited people to come to see them. So they sort of piggyback off of what was already a great campaign and made it an in-person event as well, where they could continue the marketing from there. So let's get into the how of content marketing. Content needs a distribution channel, and I think that this is important. As I said at the beginning, it's something that, we just talked about all these awesome ideas for different content that you can create, and we oftentimes invest a lot of time in the creation of that content. But if you spend all that time creating the content, you need to make sure that you're also doing your job to give it distribution and to actually market it. So what I like to say is that content marketing is really not an if you build it situation. You can't really expect to just put your content out there on the web and then have people find it spontaneously. That might happen, but it probably won't. And so that's why we need to do the marketing and content marketing. And there are a lot of different ways to do this, and I'm going to go through some examples just to sort of show you how. So the first is, you can think a little bit more in depth about where your content should live, and if it's something that's bigger than a blog post or bigger than a page on your site, you might want to consider creating a microsite around your initiative. So that's what Chipotle did for their Scarecrow video. They also had an app game that went along with it, but and that's what Google does every year for their Zeitgeist, for example. So that's when they take, at the end of the year, they take all their search data, and data about videos that were viewed and all that kind of stuff, search trends, and they put all that together on this microsite that's really interactive. You can explore. You can watch the year in review video that they always do, but you can explore the map. You can sort of dig into the search trends and see all of that search trend data for the past year. So having a microsite where you can direct all of your initiatives back to can be a really effective way of sort of hosting the marketing or hosting the initiative that you're doing the marketing for. You also want to think about advertising your content. So from a paid search perspective, from what the example here is a display perspective, so you're looking at a pretty popular content site and you're thinking about, can I run ads, for example, on that site for that, download of the white paper. And this is just a mock-up example. We did not run ads on Slate for this campaign, but that's what it could look like, for example. So you want to make sure that you are saving some budget for actual advertising of the content, whether that's going to be, as I said, from search, display, Facebook advertising, for example. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do that, but just know that you should be investing some sort of ad spend in getting this content in front of people. Making the content accessible and shareable and promoted in social networks is huge as well. So I'm going to take the example of this white paper, which you were able to download right from the client's Facebook page. So there's a promotion here for the free white paper. They're posting about it on the page as well. So making that content really accessible from the sort of initiation point is a great way to make sure that your content is being seen and then being accessed by the people who you want to be exposed to it. You can even send content that is actually print media So this is an example from fab.com. Somebody in our office got this sent to her. It's a little box there. And then it had all these cards in it. And these are some examples of the cards. On one side, you had an image of a product being used, a fab product being used in real life. And then on the other side, you had sort of a description of the product. And this was a really amazing example, I think, of some offline content, how you can use content in your traditional or print initiatives, and tie it back to the brand on the web. So you have the final card in the deck was about prompting you to follow the founder on Instagram, follow the brand on Instagram, find them on Facebook, download the app, etc., etc. So you're taking content, reserving it for this offline initiative, and then prompting people who interact with the media itself to then share it back on the web. And then finally, email marketing is kind of a no-brainer, but the example I use of Spotify with the 2013 year in review, obviously, they're not just going to count on us finding that spontaneously on social media. They're going to email their users as well and say, hey, we have this year in review, check yours out. And of course, this is a mobile-friendly email as well, so that users can access it on their mobile phones, which is pretty important as well. So that is it. Thank you guys so much for participating. In the meantime, we're going to do some Q&A, but also just know that you can find us on the web via our own content marketing initiatives, on our blog, through our white papers, and through our webinars. So we can definitely do some questions here. We have one already. How many pieces of content should I realistically create per month? And I think that's a great question, but I would not really focus on thinking of it that way. You want to, as I said, kind of create the campaign that makes sense for your audience, and then think about, first of all, what that content's going to be. So if it's a white paper, you're not even going to be probably creating one a month. You might do one a quarter, or really whenever you have that useful information to share. So I think it's less about how much and more about, can you produce quality content that is going to be consumed? And if you're just going to be pumping out content that isn't really useful, I would shy away from doing that just to hit some sort of target minimum. How many different kinds of content should I be creating? I think, again, it comes back to what kind of content your users want. So we use the example of Warby Parker. They're probably not going to, that audience is probably not going to need like a white paper, for example, or a webinar even, but they might be interested in that annual report that I showed. They might be interested in videos or photographs from Warby Parker retail locations, or of people trying on the frame. So I would encourage you to try out and test a lot of different types of content, but not necessarily to try to like do everything. Really only do what's appropriate for your audience, and test it out, see what works, because some content's going to perform better for your audience, and some won't. How do you reuse content without creating duplicate or annoying content that people don't like? So that's an interesting question for sure. I think it's really about mainly repurposing the content for different mediums. So, if we have one audience that's going to come to an event, but they probably won't do a webinar, then we can use that content in both those scenarios. And, we can repurpose that content for a video on YouTube, for example, without sort of running the risk of making people annoyed by it, because they don't, they won't see it unless they're searching for it. We're not going to be doing a lot of heavy marketing around that. I would say that the key here is not to market to the same audience all the time, and to only repurpose the content if you feel that it's going to be targeted at different audiences or different different sort of times in the decision cycle, for example. How do I justify the time and effort that goes into creating content like this to a boss that might not be sold on the idea? Yeah, that's tough. And that's why I think it's really fundamental to define what you think success is going to be. You want to get your boss on board with what you're trying to do. So if you're if you're trying to increase visitors to your website, you need to think about creating content that's going to help you do that. So it's about setting the success metrics that are going to make a difference. I would, as I said, encourage you not to think in terms of like short-term sales or ROI, but how content is going to influence other marketing efforts and what the success metrics are going to be. I think a lot of the value in content marketing is that it can be repurposed, as we talked about, and it can also influence a lot of different channels. So it's, content is part of SEO, content is part of social media. So having that content so that you can do marketing is, I think, a pretty solid justification for investing in it. Let's see, what do we have here? What is a reasonable test period for content? That's an interesting question. So it depends how many, it really is going to depend on how much exposure your content gets, because if you're a small brand and people, only are going to be coming to your social pages or, reading your blog or attending your webinar, on a very small scale, it's going to take you longer to build up some sort of some data around whether or not that content is quote-unquote successful. So if you only have 10 visitors to a blog post and one of them shared it, it's going to be tough to say with the next blog post, okay, we had 10 people view it and 2 people shared it. So that's such a small sample that it'll be really hard to say. So I think the test period comes down to how long it takes you specifically to get to a data sample that is going to be statistically significant for you. Okay. I think, let's see, are RSS feeds still something I should be using to disseminate content with? That's definitely something that you can do. Again, I would, I'm always going to sort of advise to not limit yourself in terms of how you promote content. So I wouldn't, rely on that. I would say, making sure that your content is being promoted in a variety of ways to see sort of where it lands and what's effective and what isn't. Can UX or UI members of my team help me create good content? Definitely. I think UX and UI comes into play in a big way when you're creating, website content. So where content's going to live on the website, what types of things do users need to have addressed at certain stages in their interaction with the website. That's something that you definitely want to have UX and UI involved in. That's a really foundational element of creating, a really great website that addresses user needs, and content is obviously a big part of that. So you want those people to be advising of where content needs to live and what needs to, as I said, what needs to get addressed at each stage of the process. Okay, well, I don't think we have any other questions. So definitely check us out on our blog, download our white papers, check out our webinars. Thank you everyone so much for attending. And we will be, I'm sure, sharing this around so that you can access it later if you need to.